back to my channel. It's Tony. If you don't know who I am, welcome to the channel. If it's your first time. Today I'm doing a requested video that I got through my DMs about life modelling. So I started life modelling back in October 2021 and it's been a truly amazing experience. And I've had a lot of people come to me like they want to do it as well. So I thought I'd just put together this video, sharing my experience and helping you find your first gig. Hopefully. It only makes sense for me to bring in the person who got me into life modelling in the first place, and that is my amazing friend WingKei. Come on in.
Thank you so much for that lovely welcome, and thank you for having me today.
Let's start by talking about how you got into life modelling.
Shall I talk about this?
Oh yeah. You know what, before we even dive into that, why don't you tell us all about you?
Who am I? I would say now at this stage in my life is probably one of the more joyous stages of my life, and that is the version of WingKei, who is a tattoo artist and also a life model, and just here to represent my Asian sisters and my women of colour.
Amazing. All right, so how did you get into life modelling?
How did I get into life modelling? So I guess it all started from, say, 5 years ago, actually, when I started going to life drawing classes as just an artist. Like, I hadn't even drawn figures before, so went to this class and I kept going to more and more classes. I felt like I was always the odd one out, just in terms of the artist demographic. So I was usually the youngest person there, always the only woman there, and also the only woman of colour there. So I pushed throughout all of these years because I found it was just such a beautiful activity to do, just seeing models when they're most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see someone who's that vulnerable, it makes you kind of connect with them and you kind of know their stories without even having to talk to them. So I thought that was really powerful. And I just remember the very first class I went to, just seeing how this male model just dropped their robes and my jaw just slowly reached the ground. I was like, because first of all, how confident they were. And secondly, how all the other artists would see them just so professionally. It wasn't like, nobody was like, oh my God, what's he doing? Or like, why does he look like that? It was just professional. Yeah. It was as if they had clothes on. It was so normalized. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny? Wouldn't it be funny if I was a life model? And then 5 years later, I essentially took the leap into life modeling myself. And that was only after I felt confident enough in my own body and also as an artist. So it was a little bit of everything with some really good friends over at To Be or Not To Be Collective, who are the life drawing group who essentially brought me into the industry. And just through their welcoming words and just seeing how they operate makes me think, okay, the model is getting treated really well, and it's within a safe space, and it's essentially drawing with people and posing for people who are your friends. So there wasn't really an element of alienness to it.
My first time was also with To Be or Not To Be Collective. So WingKei told me that they were looking for new models, and I've been on this journey of learning to accept my body and loving all parts of my body and parts of it that I didn't always like when I was younger. And I always thought, life modeling seemed really cool, and it was the ultimate and most radical self-expression of self-love that I could do, because I would just be going there as I am. And what was really great about my first ever modeling gig with 2B was that it was tutored, and the people that were in attendance were just so supportive. And what I really loved was that at the end of it, Lily, who was tutor, was like, can you give Tony a round of applause? And I found that so empowering because they were just applauding me for being me. And that was it. I didn't have to do anything else. I just had to be me in my own body. And that was just very comforting and I just loved that atmosphere. And that's what kept me going back for more. Now that we know why you got into it, what keeps you going back? Like, why do you keep doing it?
I think once you first experience that high of trying to become a life model for the first time, it gets very addictive. It's like, okay, you've explored yourself, you've made that dent, you've made that drop in the ocean. Now you want to explore yourself more and more and see what else can my body do? What other crazy poses can I hold for 20 minutes? And what kind of things can I think about during the life modeling? Because it's actually a very meditative, I personally find it a very meditative thing to do, where you're just kind of posing or standing there and you're just sitting there with your own thoughts. You have to be very comfortable with silence, and I feel like I thrive in silence. It's sort of like you're being loud but also very quiet at the same time. That's what keeps me going, and also just connecting with different artists, because I'm an artist myself and I like seeing how other people see me and vice versa. it's just so much fun.
Yeah.
I don't know what else, what more to say about it. It's
What do
great.
you think about when you're life modeling? When you're in those really long poses, 20 minutes, 10 minutes long, what do you think about?
What do I think of everything? Things like, what am I going to eat for dinner tomorrow? Just trying not to laugh.
Yeah.
I'm just holding in my laughter because I feel like, you understand.
Yeah. So if I know anyone in the audience, I always have to look away from them. Otherwise, I know I'll just start cracking up. And usually when I pose as well, I never look anyone in the eye. Even the complete strangers, I never look in the eye because if I look them in the eye, then I feel like, am I looking too much? Is this too intense? Because I'm there naked and they're meant to be drawing me and they're looking up like, I'm like,
have you ever cracked up laughing before?
No.
Because I have, 2 times. I remember once it was like a Christmas one. They were playing Christmas music in the background. Yeah. It was just so silly. It was like, what song were they playing? It's just when like the Christmas music gets higher and higher in key.
Yeah.
And I burst out laughing and I had to like grit my teeth. That's a really good tip. If you're life modeling, you want to hold in your laughter, you grit your teeth. Think about sad puppies.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the whole like no eye contact thing. What I usually do is that like I look just above. Or like I really like holding my chin up just because it gives a nice posture. So I'm like looking into the corner of the room. Yeah.
What's your relationship like with your body? Like, how did you feel comfortable being able to pose in the nude? Because it's a really hard thing to do. I have a lot of people who come to me and they say, "Oh, I'd love to do life modeling, but I don't really have the confidence to do it. I don't feel like my body is the right body to be in those kind of spaces." How do you overcome that?
For me, it came from just seeing how other people did it and seeing how sometimes you see yourself represented within a model. So, for example, if there was an East Asian female model and I see them modeling, I'm like, okay, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it? So the representation is already there in some shape or form. It's not fully there yet, but there is an element of it. And all you have to do is just step into it. Like the space is there for you if you can find those communities. And I'm sure like we'll link those as well in the description. It just takes a little bit of leap of faith and trusting the people who are seeing you that vulnerable, working with people who uplift you as well and value you and pay you for your time and energy. Because I had a really horrible relationship with my body up until when I started life modeling, actually. So I was always an overweight kid. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of me.
I've seen
pictures of me. Yeah, I was an overweight kid. Plus, I was a person of color, so already felt alienated. So person of color, overweight, also had glasses. I mean, like, if there was another reason to like bully me, it would be glasses. So I just felt like I never fit in. And I felt like I was in this cycle of being traumatized by my body and then also living in ignorant bliss. It was like trauma bliss, because you don't know what life is like otherwise. So you're like, okay, I have this body, it's never going to change. I just need to learn to live with it because I never felt what it was like to be beautiful, so I just accepted it. And then there were also moments of like when you get older, your hips start growing out and men would start sexualizing you or catcalling you and stuff. And I think when that first started happening, I took it as a form of validation. So I was like, okay, finally someone noticed me. But it's just so unhealthy to think like that. Like when I look back at it in hindsight, it's like, wow, the things we had to unlearn, there's just societal pressures are so damaging. And yeah, it feels good to be able to reclaim that body now into something that's quite positive and brings people together.
There's something that you told me a while ago that has actually stuck with me is you said something like, your body is just your body. It's not there to fulfill any other purposes other than to just be a host for you, a home for you. It's not supposed to be something that is meeting society's expectation of beauty. It's not there to fulfill anyone else's purpose or to meet anyone else's gaze. It's just there.
It's just there.
Yeah, it's just there.
Yeah. I'm like, why are we putting so much emphasis on what it does? And well, what it does. It's just normal. We came out of the womb with a body. We actually didn't even wear any clothes when we came out of the womb. So clothes are abnormal. Bodies aren't. I
think back to my first time when I was in that room. I didn't even have a robe because I didn't really think about the preparation behind it. They have my sandals. They have a robe. I had a little jacket that I was covering up. I was like, am I really ready to do this? And the feelings I was feeling just before derobing for the first time was a lot of anxiety. I was really nervous about it. I was second guessing whether I could actually go through this and do it. But then after you take the robe off and you get into your first pose and you settle into it, the nerves sort of dissipate and they flow away, and you kind of ease into it. And I definitely think the more you do it, the easier it gets. I think the first time is always going to be the hardest, but once you get over that hump, plain sailing from there, I think.
Gets addictive.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah.
Does. So what are your thoughts on, like you said before, you know, we're born naked, and as RuPaul says, the rest is drag. So what do you think about nudity? Like, is it something that should be normalized? Is it something that we need to sort of become we should become desensitized to?
I find this topic a really difficult thing to talk about, because for us, like, because we're both in that life modeling bubble, so we're like, yeah, nude, everything is great. Let's go to all of these like nude parties, nude beaches, everything nude.
We love to be naked.
And then I had a chat with someone very recently who was a naturist, and she was talking about how she was able to walk around her family home naked in front of her mum and dad, and like maybe any other like male figures in her house. And that was like, maybe that's a stage that I hadn't fully reached yet. But the kind of point she was saying was that if a man or even a woman looks at you and kind of feels uncomfortable, that's on them. But I agree with that.
I agree too, because you're not responsible for other people's feelings.
You're not responsible, but I just feel like it's such a difficult thing to say to someone who's not there yet. Like, I can't imagine myself doing that in front of any male figures in my family, or even my own mum. I wouldn't do it because it makes her feel comfortable as well.
Nakedness is quite normal in my family. Like, my mum walks around naked.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she walks around naked. So my younger brothers and me and my sister, we've always seen the naked body around us, and we haven't really sexualized it. But what I find that is a bit different is that as me and my sister got older, we couldn't be walking around naked like my mum did. If it was like this unspoken rule that the nakedness was just for her, and it was just okay because we were her children, but it wouldn't be okay for my brothers to see me or my sister naked, which I totally get, because I feel like I'd be weird about that as well.
Was that something that you took upon yourself to do? Or was that something that your mum had to remind you?
Well, no, it's something that I took upon myself to do, because in my head it's like, they shouldn't be seeing me naked because I'm their sister. So I didn't really see it as appropriate for me to be walking around naked like that.
Yeah, I think sometimes there are boundaries that you have to put in place. I don't know, if you were eating with someone and you were naked, for example, and you're sitting like this, legs wide, and you're eating with somebody, that's a boundary that I would happily like put. Yeah. Because it's like, okay, bodies are great, nudity is great, but there's some things that people don't need to see at certain points. I think just be smart about it.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And consent is everything, because even though you're comfortable with nakedness, you shouldn't be forcing that nakedness on other people if they're not comfortable with it. Yeah. Thinking back to our first ever experience with life modeling, do you have any sort of tips for someone who is wanting to get into life modeling? Any advice where they can look for their first gig?
I always send everyone to the same place, which is my favourite people, To Be or Not To Be Collective, because they are a POC-run life drawing group, and they only employ people who are marginalised. So people who are POC, maybe if they are trans, queer, if they're disabled as well. The other good thing is that they're very happy to take on first-time models. Some places you'll find that they require you to have done a little bit experience before. To Be or Not To Be Collective, if you've done no modelling work at all, they're very happy to help you out on that. And I think they pride themselves on that as well, that they like pull people out and make sure they step out of their comfort zones. And then a lot of them, including me, after they've done their first gig with To Be or Not To Be Collective, they go off and do their own thing. So it really takes that like small dent, and then you're just free. You can do whatever you want. They've instilled that confidence in you, well, for me as well, to do that.
Once you get your foot in the door, it's a lot easier to keep getting other gigs, because then you can draw on that experience. You could share the drawings that were done of you in the class as well. So always take pictures in the classes that you go to, because then you can build up sort of like a portfolio of some sort that you can share with new classes, new organisers, so show that you've actually done it before. I also use Eventbrite as well to find life modelling classes around London. I usually stay to South London and Central London, just because it's quite hard for me to get back home after a class, especially if it's in the evening. From east or west or north, anywhere that's extreme, it's going to take a long time for me to get back home. That's something to think about when you are trying to find classes, thinking about the locations, because usually they're in the evening and they usually last about 2 hours. So I would sometimes get home about 10 o'clock. If I'm really far out, I went somewhere in Hackney one time and I got back at like 11. Never again. I'm never going that far again. Yeah. So Eventbrite's really good. Searching hashtags on Instagram as well. So Life Drawing London, Life Drawing South London, that sort of thing. Will help you find some other places. places. And then once you start following some accounts, you start getting suggested other accounts. And then from there, you get recommendations. I've even had people who have been drawing me recommend classes they want me to go to as well, which has been really good.
Yeah. My first port of call is usually just to ask people that I know, ask for recommendations, because there's nothing better than word of mouth. And also people know kind of what's good and what's not good, who pays well, who doesn't pay well. If you're very, very new to the life drawing community, as in you don't consider yourself an artist just yet, you could like connect with other artists. You could go to the sessions yourself, because there's nothing more telling or like more informative than going to one and seeing how people interact there. Just making those natural connections, you know. And it's not like you have to make those connections because you have a motive, because it always starts with resonating with someone first and liking their work, and then a natural connection kind of builds off on there.
So let's move on to what you were saying before about pay rates.
Let's talk about
pay can vary depending on the venues you go to. There are some people who've been running life modeling classes for a long time, and they're still very much stuck in the past. I remember one time I reached out to someone locally to me because I thought, it'd be really great to be able to just walk to a class. I don't have to take a bus or a train to get there. And I sent them through some pictures of me working, and they seemed really keen. And when I asked them how much their rate was, and they were like, £30. Like, oh, £30 an hour. And they're like, oh no, if it was that, I'd be doing modeling. I was like, well, then maybe you should be increasing the pay. So when I said, I don't go below £20 an hour, most places pay me £25 an hour, and they were just very adamant that they weren't going to pay me. I was like, okay, well then I'm going to go elsewhere. And they were trying to justify it by saying they've been running it for years. They are part of these like membership groups, and they have models who come back every time. I was like, just because those models don't know any better doesn't mean that what you're doing is correct. Because if you think about what you're doing, you're literally posing nude, and you're posing for like 5-10 minutes, sometimes 20-minute poses, 30-minute poses. It's a lot of work. It's actually a lot of hard work, because you're being still. And being still is incredibly hard, especially if you're neurodivergent, or if you have some disabilities. Being still is a lot of work, and it's an art form, and they should be paying you accordingly. My recommendation is to never go below £20 an hour, and that's what someone so Lily Holder, who was the tutor, my first one, she did a whole really great session on Instagram talking about pay rates and the industry, and she said, £20 is like the minimum you should accept. 25 should really be what you're aiming for.
25 is my minimum. The most I've ever gotten paid was over 100, actually. That was actually my first one that I did.
Really?
Yeah, so I did my first one online over Zoom. And I guess with Zoom, you can like get as many people in as you want all in one room. And that was also at the height of lockdown. So people didn't have anywhere else to go. It was my debut. So a lot of my friends like came to support me, which was really nice. That one was like 150 quid. But that one was also dependent on how many people who could come. Different classes will run differently in terms of pay. Some will ask you for your rates. Some will have their own rates already, and some will say you just get 50% of all the ticket sales. Classes that give you 50% does mean that you kind of have to take it upon yourself to do the marketing and like getting people in, which is also kind of work in itself. And sometimes it can be very stressful thinking like, oh my God, what if no one comes? And not only does that look bad on you, but it also looks bad on the class that you're trying to represent. Yeah, I would say the safest thing to do is to first look for reputable classes, ask for what their rates are, and have your bar set at whatever rate you want to set yourself at, whether that's £20 an hour minimum or 25. I usually go for 25 because I live quite far out, and it usually takes me quite a long time to get anywhere. And some classes will cover your travel if you ask for it. I don't know if you've ever asked for travel money before.
I haven't asked, but they have always said that you can ask. Because I usually choose classes that are close to me. I stick to South London or Central London, which is quite easy for me to get to. London is huge, and it takes so long to get from south to all the way to north.
Even going south to south.
South to north.
I had a really bad experience with one life drawing class very recently, and I don't know if I should say what the name is.
Don't say the name. We'll say no names.
What I usually do when I'm trying to find gigs is that I just send people a DM just explaining like who I am, what I do, what kind of experience that I have. And this particular class, they were like, okay, very, very happy to take you on as a model. I pay £40 for 2 hours. So that is the minimum, basically £20 an hour. And then I replied to them saying, my minimum is 25 an hour, but thank you for your time. And then I just plan to leave, like exit the chat as normal. And then they came back to me, which I don't know if they were like being sarcastic or not. And they were like, oh, you should have started off with that earlier, then I would have paid you 60.
What?
And then I was like,
wait. If they have the money, why are they just saying
it
that?
started off so badly. And then I was like, okay, me trying to be civilized about it, I was like, I understand. I said, I understand, but I wanted to see what you offered first. And then I said, thank you again. And then I planned to leave again. And then they were like, oh, you should have started off with that. I could have paid you 80. And I'm like, why does the number keep going up and up and up? I'm like, and then they went, have a nice day. Take care. And then I was just like, I was like, you know when some people are just not worth your time?
No.
So I left, and then I realised that they blocked me.
Wow.
And I was like, what is happening right now? I did nothing. I did nothing.
So yeah, those are red flags to look out for. So you can always go in and ask them what their rates are to start with, like ask them what their budget is for the models. And if they're like, oh, this is what we do, then if they're a bit too low, you can always ask them to reconsider. If they're not willing to reconsider, then move on, because there are plenty of life modelling classes and new ones being started as well. So you don't need to, I personally don't think you need to undersell yourself even as a beginner. There is no need for you to go down to £15 now, because there are classes that will pay you what you want. Don't stress over the ones who won't pay you. Just swiftly exit, as WingKei tried to do.
It's tough because there are some life models out there who solely rely on life modelling for the money, so they have to take it no matter how badly they treat them. And
personally, I wouldn't recommend life modelling as a sole income, especially if you're just starting out, because it's quite hard and it's also quite laborious as well. It's a very difficult thing to do in back to back, like
physically demanding.
Very physically demanding. When I had classes, like 2 classes a week, I was tired after that. So I can only imagine what it's like having to do 5 classes a week. No, and having to travel around London as well to get to them.
Yeah, and often you have to like get there a little bit before the class starts, so like you have to account for that time that you're gonna be wasting. And have you ever like started a pose and committed to the pose and you're like, I should not have done that?
So many times.
Usually it's the one with the arms.
Yeah. Oh god. Oh, when it comes to posing, you learn this very early on, but anything above, I would say I can maybe last 2 minutes with a pose with my hand in the air. That's as much as I can do. Otherwise, I'm slowly like going down.
I find that like sometimes it gets to a point where it's so painful and your arm goes numb that you actually just don't feel it. So I'm like, okay, once you're past that point, it's actually okay.
I don't want to reach
out. I think I did something like this. I did something like this for like 5 minutes. Never again. Oh, also another good tip for life modelling is that you often start slouching as time goes on. Just like keep checking yourself to like make sure your core is straight.
You actually mentioned before that you did online and in person life modelling classes. So how are they different?
Yeah, so I started off as online. I started off being a life drawing artist during the pandemic. So a lot of these classes were online, and then I started doing it online. And I thought, I guess that was kind of a way for me to break that barrier. So it was like I was in my own room, essentially. I was modelling in my own room, even though all of these people were drawing me. It was like they weren't even there. It was like they didn't even exist. They're just internet people. So that made it easier for me, knowing that I was in my own safe space. I find online modelling actually a lot easier because you can kind of frame yourself and you can get quite creative with like the angles and the posing. You could like put your phone on the floor and then you could like kind of loom above it and do all these crazy angles, foreshortening and stuff. And the way I kind of do my poses is that I pose what would look good for an artist. So like me being an artist, I usually like foreshorten poses, for example. So I like to do a lot of foreshortening, and it's never really stressful. Like sometimes you do think you run out of poses, but then you just come up with something on the spot. Or like sometimes people will help you. Sometimes you can ask artists like, what do you want me to do? And then they'll give you suggestions. Like it really is such a community building exercise that you don't really feel like it's work sometimes. Another good point about online is that safety is paramount. These classes will say to all the artists as a disclaimer, being like, do not screenshot or record. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. You think it's like minimum, right? It's so easy, but yet there are people who still do it. And you don't know unless like their speakers are on. Sometimes their speakers are on and you can hear the screenshot. And yeah, that's always a really crazy position to be in. in. I've never personally known to have someone screenshot me, but I've heard through other people that like they've heard that sound, and it's just, yeah, what a shock it is for that model to know that that person's got their naked pictures forever. So it is always a risk, and there's nothing really you can do about it except just look for classes and look for artists who are serious about your safety. Yeah, respectful.
So do you go full nude on online ones, or?
I actually, no, I don't always do full nude actually. I think I only did full nude once, and that was because my hair had like grown out quite a lot, so it like covered a lot of it. I don't know why I kind of used that as like a barrier. I'm quite self-conscious about the way like my vagina looks. That for me, having the hair growth there kind of covered it all for me, so I felt protected. But usually I wear underwear online. My rule is that underwear online, and you can go full nude in person, because in-person classes, again, no cameras.
Yeah, they're very strict, and they say no photography allowed in classes. The only reason why I've been able to get photos from the classes is because I've had someone there who I've told, you can take my pictures for my phone for me to use online. And then how is the setup for online? Because do you just use your phone? Do you use a camera? Do you need any fancy lighting? Just the iPhone, just a humble iPhone. I think when I started, I had the horrible iPhone 6S that I used on my front camera actually. So like even the camera at the front is even worse than the one at the back. And you'll find that like as you go to more classes as an artist or even as a model, that even people who you think are quote unquote professional models who've been doing this for years and rely on it quite a lot for money, that they don't have the best equipment. It doesn't really matter. If people like you and they want to draw you, they will do what it takes to draw you, and it doesn't really matter, because when you're on that screen, if you imagine like you're posing for someone on their computer screen, it's already quite small. Often people just they do their own interpretations of you. They don't focus on realism. It doesn't really matter if something looks like you or doesn't look like you. So yeah, all you need is an iPhone and a tripod. A tripod is helpful. It's not mandatory. I've tried before you got me that tripod. Actually, I was just using like books and like hairbands and blue tack, and yeah, it gets difficult when you're trying to move around. Sometimes the classes will ask you to do like a range of poses. So sometimes you'll be standing up, sometimes sitting down, and for the longer ones you'd be lying down. For the lying down ones, you want to have your phone landscape so you can get the full length of the body. Oh, another point about online is that it can also be recorded if you want it to. So some classes they will help you record the class and keep it as a replay for the artists who couldn't make it at that time. And that's actually a really good way to connect with artists all over the world who like have different time zones and things. But again, it runs the risk of people keeping that video or like screenshotting you, screen grabbing it. And even though you'll be paid the royalties, it's a risk that you have to know what you're getting into. So there's a lot to think about whether you want to go online, in person, or a bit of both. You don't need fancy equipment to go online, and it could be easier for you if you can't get down, if you don't have loads of live modeling classes near you, like if you're not in London. I know we're very lucky to be in London. There's loads of classes all around us. But I know out in the other parts of the UK there might not be as many. So there are a lot of online life drawing classes that are run, and you can get in touch with them if you want to do it and you're not in London and you just use your phone. But do bear in mind the things that WingKei did say into consideration in terms of like your privacy, your security, how safe you feel, how naked you're willing to go. And that's the good thing about life modeling, is that you don't have to go full nude. You can keep your underwear on. There are going to be some places where it's just you and the floor. There are no props. You might get a chair in there as well and some cushions. So I think it is a good idea to kind of have some loose idea of what sort of standing, sitting and laying down poses you can do, because those are the 3 different types of poses. And depending on the space as well, how it's laid out, sometimes they might advise you not to do too many on the floor lying down poses, just because of how the seats are positioned. Some of the artists may not be able to see you as well, so you might not be able to rely too much on lying down poses. Like we said before, do not do a pose with your hand in the air for more than 2 minutes, because realistically you will not be able to hold it and it will really hurt. I've done a pose as well where I've just been holding my neck in a really weird way and it hurts after a while. So I definitely think practicing. And also you kind of you learn by trial by error. Like if you do a pose, I remember so many poses where I've tried to do something different, and then 2 minutes in I'm like, Jesus, oh my god, I have made the worst mistake of my life. When is this gonna end? And I'm just counting down in my head.
Each second is like an hour.
And in my head I'm like, okay, 1 song has passed, that means 3 minutes has passed, I've got 3 minutes left, I can do this.
Have you ever like stopped in between because it hurt so much?
And there was one time where I was looking at the person with the time on their phone. I was blinking. I was like, please cut it quickly because I couldn't do the full 7 minutes because I was in a lot of pain. But I didn't actually say it out loud, but because they could see me, I could communicate, not verbally, but like through my eyes, that I needed to stop. And I was glad they saw that. There have been some times when I've had to sort of adjust very minutely, like you couldn't really tell that I was adjusting, but I was moving and then shifting. Yeah. There's like little tricks you can do to help you last longer.
Yeah. Moving a little bit. Yeah. Kind of getting the blood flowing back in. That's usually a good one. I've never done it before. I've never cut a post short, but I was so close to doing it. But if you do, don't be like ashamed about it, because often the organisers will say, you know, if you're tired, just let us know. Like if they're good organisers, they will make you feel comfortable like that. And don't commit to something that you can't do, because if you're uncomfortable, the artist will also be uncomfortable, and then the whole room is just uncomfortable. Because if they can see someone who's like shaking or like struggling, they're just not gonna have a good time. Yeah, if you're comfortable, then everyone else is comfortable. You're essentially responsible for the whole room. No pressure.
You can always like a quick reset as well. I've done that. There's no shame in saying, oh, you know, give me a few seconds, let me jiggle it all out and then go back into the pose. So do you think it is worth putting together a portfolio? Like when you're reaching out to people, like could you give them an example of what sort of things they can include in an email or a DM if you're trying to reach out to an organizer about modelling for the first time?
I would say something quite friendly. Just say something like, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. Say how you came across their platform. Say like, oh, I found your platform through a few friends, or like I've maybe even gone to one of your classes and I'm interested in working with you in these ways. So in this way, it would be, I'm interested in becoming a model if you're looking for models. And I always add that bit, if you're looking for models, because often they get so many models contacting them. Usually you get more models contacting the classes than the people actually coming to the classes. And I think with Instagram, it makes it very easy for people to like send a quick message or a quick inquiry. And it is a good thing, and it's also a bad thing, I think, because for us, when you're looking for work, it could be as easy as sending someone a DM. You don't even have to do an email. Yeah, just be mindful of people's time and like what other models are contacting them.
Don't feel bad if they don't get back to you straight away. Sometimes their inbox is just so full and they don't have time to get around to it. Don't feel bad about sending them a follow-up message like a couple of weeks later. I've done that a few times where I know that organisers are so busy and they're always getting DMs from new models. So if someone doesn't get back to me, I don't feel bad. I know that they're busy, so I'll just send a follow-up like a couple of weeks later, just say, oh hey, I'm still interested, let me know if you have some availability in your class for the next couple of weeks. And that usually gets a better response, because it shows that you are keen and interested and you're very empathetic to what they're doing and their classes. So don't be deterred if you don't get responses straight away. Just keep going, keep trying, and just reaching out to different organizations, even organisers.
But be polite about it. Don't just be like a question mark send. I know some people who've done that with me as well, and I'm just like, huh?
Always remember
who raised you?
Always remember to be polite.
Or another good way of following up is providing your email to them, because sometimes organisers don't like using social media as a form of communication. So it's just making that bit a little bit easier for them as well.
You're more likely to catch flies with honey than with, I can't remember the rest of the saying, but be nice. Basically be nice.
It's cool to be kind. That applies to everything.
Exactly. Once you get started into life modelling, you might get the opportunity to start doing private classes, and we're just going to talk about how you can set that up, because of course you're going to be in a one-to-one setting. You're usually going to be in their place, so they're going to be hosting. There's a lot to think about, like your safety and then also your rates as well. Do your rates change now that you're doing one-to-one, or is it going to be the same sort of rates you're accepting when you're doing classes? How about you share your experience of doing private classes?
I've actually only ever done private classes once, and that was with an artist who I kind of already had a rapport with. So I'd see him in life drawing classes, and I wasn't too close with him. I wasn't like buddy. I wouldn't like ask him to go out on the weekends. Not that level. But I knew he was a serious artist, because I could see like he was always drawing people. You know, everyone always has really nice things to say about him. When I approached him asking him whether he would like to draw me as a model, it was actually a clothed first. Yeah, it was a clothed first session. He was doing a portrait of me, so it didn't even matter what I wore. It's just, you just bring your lovely face and you talk throughout the whole thing, depending on like what the artist wants to do. It's actually just a nice way of like socializing while working. but it is also possible to do it online. The life drawing community is like very widespread. You know, you end up drawing models from across the globe, and sometimes, you know, you find someone all the way in Colombia and you're like, oh, I really want to draw you. You set a time and yeah, go from there. Find serious artists. If there's anything to take away from this, find the serious artist. And also ask the models what their experience was with the artist. Yeah. Because sometimes, especially with the models who really rely on this for money, they don't speak out about some of the issues that they've had. Always just send them a DM. People are always happy to help. So I didn't set my own rates on this one. It was whatever he was paying. That was £60 for 2 hours. But he was also doing them in blocks of 4. So like you get drawn by this person, he draws you 4 times. So 240 quid altogether, which is actually quite a good way of like getting that regular income. I feel like I just got lucky with this one. Yeah. No, he's a really good one.
I've had some people approach me after classes saying they would like to join me one-to-one, and they don't quite understand that it's a bit different. So I spoke with a few people to ask about like rates and that sort of thing. I had no idea how I was supposed to navigate private classes because I've done them before. And someone told me that, you know, you should charge like at least £25 an hour, and then you should also factor in travel costs as well because you're going to their place. Factor in breaks as well. Let them know that even though you're going to be paying for 2 hours, that includes breaks as well. And then also like certain sort of like guidelines. I would never personally do a private class with someone who I haven't met before, just a safety reason. I just don't feel comfortable with going to someone's house that I've never met formally in person. I also, like WingKei said, I get references from models who've worked with them in the past as well, just to make sure they're an okay person to be working with. I'd have to speak to the person directly. Like, I don't want screenshots of messages or something like that. I want to be able to talk to the person one-to-one to know whether they had a good experience or not. So if you are considering doing private classes, always think about your safety first. Think about what your boundaries are and make sure they're clearly communicated before you get there, so they understand what you're happy to do and what you're not going to be doing. And then just making sure that they're respectful. And, you know, if you ever feel uncomfortable at any point in time, even if money has exchanged hands, you have the right to leave. Like, if they make you feel uncomfortable just because they paid you, it doesn't mean you have to stay at all.
Always bring a robe with you wherever you go.
Bring some sandals, bring flip-flops. So I always bring like my slippers with me that I can walk around with during the breaks and at the end as well to take pictures and stuff.
I say snacks as well.
Snacks? Yeah.
Usually these class times are over dinner times. So yeah, keep yourself sustained. Keep drinking water. Go to the toilet before.
So I hope you guys found this video useful if you're looking to get into the life modelling world. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section and I'll respond as soon as I can. If you have any questions for WingKei, I'll be linking all her socials in the description as well. So you can go ahead and follow her and potentially draw her if you want to. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video if you really enjoyed it, and turn on notifications so that when I do eventually post videos, I know I don't post often, you'll be the first to know. I appreciate all of your support and I will see you next time. Support her.